How could I knew that this would go so totally wrong? Didn't I look close enough at the details? Didn't I see the signs? Was I walking too blindly, not seeing the edge I was standing at? It was back in the year 2013. Maybe some of you remember it as a great summer. Many new JavaScript frameworks popped up like mushrooms everywhere. You just had to pick one and try it out. And in this wonderful year, I started super enthusiastically into my first IT project, full of things that I would learn, people I would meet. And I met one. Let's call him Andrew for a second. He wasn't that tall, but he was very handsome, easy to go with. We programmed together, we fixed the bugs, and finally, we launched. Awesome. In my mind, this was a total success story, but it even got further. We spent our free time together, and I already had hopes and dreams for a future. This was going so well that I did approach him, telling him, "You know, Andrew, what do you think about the future? Our future?" He wasn't that sure about our future. He wasn't even sure about his future. There I stood, shocked, not knowing what to do next. So my mind, the worrying engine started. Why could that happen? Like, did you perceive this so wrong? What was the error? Was it about him, about you, about the two of you, things that went wrong? But also some voice in my head said, didn't he always pretend to be a hero? If there are any obstacles, wouldn't he just take his sword? Wouldn't he fight for you? Why the heck else would he always carry that red shield with him? He couldn't protect me. He couldn't even protect himself. So on a Black Thursday, on a conference in Paris, you all might remember all my hopes and dreams and those of many others. Maybe also some of yours, they died with a big dong, dong. Doesn't look that dong, dong, dong. So there was heartbroken about all that, how this turned out to be. So I was wondering what to do. I talked to him. Could this go on? Can we still be together? We talked about it, and we realized we could stay together, but this wouldn't make any of us happy anymore. So we decided to break up. And in this sorrow, I decided, never again will I rely on one single framework, even if his surname is Google. So I was there heartbroken, breaking up, not knowing what to do. So I did what many people do when they broke up. I got a new haircut. That worked well. And I looked for new opportunities. So I found a new opportunity, a new company. And this doesn't work that well. That was their website online when I talked to them. So I easily looked at that. It's a German brand, so the Germans might know that. It's like Quora, so it's question and answers. There's a huge community. You can put any question you have. A lot of people will answer you and try to help you out. a bit like Stack Overflow for your private problems. So I looked at that website and easily realized they have some problems. Maybe I could help out there. So they told me a bit about their company. So they started very small, some people, and just had this gorgeous idea to have the internet to communicate if you have questions you can't ask anyone on your family or your friends. So you can ask it there, and a huge variety of people can answer you. But this went quickly on. You couldn't only ask questions. You also had new team members to have all that and implementing new features. With more people, new team, new features. More people coming, more nice things they would like to do. But, of course, then you had to coordinate all that. It's not that huge. Most of you will work in much larger companies. But still, for a small company, it's also hard to coordinate that. And this went on. And you had dependencies. So things were relying on each other, and you couldn't move on so quickly as you might wanted. And you had the complexity kicking in, because with more code, you wanted to have more abstraction layers, and on top of the abstraction layer, you had another layer. And this was getting quite complex. So if you wanted to change a little thing here, you had to be very aware it doesn't go anywhere else as well in some abstraction. So we also had side effects kicking in that you couldn't be aware of. So that was also something that always made you a bit insecure. If I change something, how will this affect the rest of the platform? And of course, you had to now have some processes. So you want to release, you had a whole release progress. That was maybe normal, but it was even worse when they started. They used the most modern technology 12 years ago, PHP. So this wasn't built at all for any enterprisey thing. So you had to have like a release process. Even when I approached the company, they told me how to do it. I did it once and never again. I was very lucky about that. So this was killing the innovation. When I wanted to have new features, I wanted to do some A/B testing or something that took a lot, and you needed to be really senior to realize what to change and how to change this. But still, new people were approaching and coming into the team and looking at that and learning that. And then they said the words that they should never have said. There was, let's migrate. They looked at the Symfony version like, wow, there are much more versions out already. Should we migrate? And they were like, no, 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 no. We don't do this. This will kill the company. So they were stuck there even 2 years before I approached them. And they already had a genius idea, because this doesn't work. We have microservices. This will rescue us. And they had a clever idea to start from the backend first. So they extracted more and more stuff out of the PHP application and put everything into wonderful, nice microservices. Did that very, very well. So if you're not familiar with the microservice thing, you just want to keep it simple and stupid. So you just want to have things that you can even throw away and doesn't hurt you anyways. So looking at like this evolved over time. So they started from this all one place, crowded, and then decided, okay, that's what also most of us did at some point, front end, back end separated. Put it in here, already had a nice interface in between that is already creating less mess. But even then inside it gets messy, so this is the idea of the microservice kicking in, to have this really nicely separation of concerns. But still, the front end stayed, and it now had to use API calls, but still got messier. So at that time, we were thinking like, hey, we can do something about that. When I approached them, they said like, we do the front end completely new. We have like new technology stack. We go with web standards. And having all this functionality in mind, we were like, okay, something like micro front ends would be really cool there as well. So we have the microservices, and when we split the front end as well, this will be just awesome. There's just one person we didn't think about first, but we should have. That's our users, and they will think, hey, this is one company, this is one website. So from the outside, this should still look like one website. It's like, OK, we can just do things to pretend that we're still one website, even though that might be several stuff like the microservices. But this is the difficult part. That's why this is a talk, because you have front-end. Whoa, this escalated quickly. I'm sorry. You have to use front-end technology, and this was now a little preview of the next slide, so you know that this might be a bit more tricky than just microservices in the backend that we already know and applied so well. So let's dive into. We know we broke up, so we have to now look at new approaches. So let's meet. Let's do a little speed dating round. Look at the different approaches, stuff we can do, and see if this might help us. So first of all, this is a super old approach most of you might have done without knowing. You just put up different websites under the same domain. So you just route differently if you're home, if you're content, if you approach the settings, or maybe an administration area, might be a completely different software. So this is a quite nice approach. So if you want to go from one website to the other, you just use links in between. But the websites themselves, they're completely independent, just one thing. And if you approach just the content page, you will always only get the content page. So this is super cool. Telefonica, for example, does this very successfully. Every part can have its own website, and they just link in between. So when you go from one part to the other, completely new website. But inside that, the team is independent. So that looks quite good, but I thought maybe we should have some requirements, like what do we really want, what do we need? And when you have requirements, you maybe think of an TDD or BDD style, like test-driven. So who of you is a fan of that, like writing the tests and checking against that? Some of you. OK. So for those of you, I'm sorry. So this is how it would look like. So for those, I just created some tests. So we will run our requirements against those tests. Let me see if this helps. So you want to develop independently, requirement met, test is green. You want to run independently, wonderful thing you can do, that's met. You can want to be technology agnostic, wonderful, every part can have its completely own stack, completely everything on their own. Wonderful. You want to have fast loading and native support of the browser. Wonderful. If you go to one part, only get one part. You don't have anything special in the HTML, so that will just work wonderfully. But you will have a hard time sharing the basics. So if you want this to look consistently to the user, that might go tricky if your designer has a brand new idea for the whole website. Might not be that nice. And if you want to have modules, that's also not that good. Or if you want to have corporate identity over all those, so every select box should work the same way, might be tricky here. So you will also not have a smooth user interaction when you go from one page to the other. It will completely load new. So in total, we have 5 passing tests, which is pretty good if you just write tests and run them. So mostly I'm not lucky like that. But you still have those failings. So what can you do to improve that approach? So one thing you could do, I'm not sure if it maybe already popped up in your head, but it's this awesome idea you want to hide from away. You can use iframes. If you should use that, that's up to you. But what you could do is a CMS system. So you can put the header and the footer in a nice CMS system, and everybody will have the same header and footer, and you will at least have that consistency overall. So that's already some nice, but we can maybe do better. Next idea, server-side includes. That's quite old technology, but still would work for that use case. So you have here that, the general server. So if he is like requesting a page, it will go to the central one, and then he will go to other servers reaching out for fragments, like here the favorites, home, content, settings. And then he will bundle everything in like some templating and give it back. So let's look how this might go. So you have some include there. This is the server-side include language, how you can include. And then you would have different parts. You could also have parameters giving to them. So the central part will then collect all the stuff from the other servers and ship it freshly to the user. That's quite cool. This is kind of looks like a microservice approach. But if we look closer and run the test against that, we might experience some problems. So this will not be fast loading, because you go to that part. This part will then go to all the other parts, wait for them, put it back in, and ship it back. So this will never be as fast as all the other approaches. And you have even more problems if one of those fails. So what do? Will you time out? Will you wait for it? Is it something important? If it's just marketing, banner, somewhere, you might forget about it. But it's maybe your buy button, and you shouldn't ship your e-commerce platform without the buy button. So how long will you wait for that? So this might get quite tricky there. And you don't have the native support. You just need this server-side include language, and you're a bit stuck with that, but what it can do, how it can integrate. And moreover that, you have the others, but still you don't have a smooth user interaction. So every time the user requests a page, this server will run, go back. So it's a complete new page every time. So we ship the same stuff, the same header over and over again. So even though you have 6 passing, you still have 3 failing. So now that we looked so on the server side, maybe we're stuck there now. At least we couldn't find any more solutions there. So we saw like, OK, we need to change the perspective there. So what could we do to go on that? So let's change the perspective. Oh, that's a quiet approach we know. That's what we maybe all do. We just ship a bundle with everything to the user, like the single-page application stuff. And then in the browser, we decide. So if you change the route, we are there. Everything is there. We already do that. So yeah, let's check how this will work, how this will run against our tests. So we can develop independently. That's maybe what we all do. But we can't run independently. So it needs to be bundled first, and then we ship it. So if it fails, it will completely fail. If one thing throws an error or doesn't compile anything, it will fail. So that's a bit of a drawback for what we wanted. But I think the worst part is that we are not technology agnostic. We will be stuck with frameworks. If we use one framework, if you decide, even if you decide now that you think like Vue is the next cool thing, we do that, but still in 5 years you might have something else. But then you're still stuck with that. You will have to migrate. If you come from the Angular one, you might know this pain from Angular 1 to 2, where you had to do a lot of stuff just to get this to the next version. So that's why we didn't consider that. Fast loading depends a bit, but initially we ship mostly too much. So this will be not that fast. But the other ones are mad. And as we already heard yesterday, what you could do, you could have lazy loading or code splitting. So you could do something on this approach. If you think, I don't want to run independently and the technology is OK, you can do that. So that's quite fine. And even for the technology, what we heard yesterday from Mike, you could also have that and use web components, use web standards to have a little bit of separation there and don't mix every framework. But still, if some versions have conflicts, like some Angular versions have conflicts, you have to have the same Angular version over the whole platform. If this is huge, this will be a problem for you, how to update that. So quite nice. So we were thinking, OK, with the servers part, we have now talked about code integration. Can't we somehow combine that? So we were like, really, it's OK, we could do this, some is nice, but maybe we can all bring it to one cool approach. So what we heard, maybe also from the progressive wrappers, is this kind of app shell. So there's something around that is dealing with everything, and this is managing things. So how does that work? He approaches the page, goes to the content, and what he just gets, independent of any route he was going to, is just an app shell. So just this thing with like a nice header, footer, maybe a spinner or some skeletons in there. And behind, it will fetch the content for him and load it. So let's look deeper at that approach. So someone comes, goes to content, the server just pushes back the app shell. He doesn't care about the routing, anything, just gives back the app shell. And then the routing, so that's what we already have seen yesterday with the view routing, so that's completely the same idea. You just have routes and tell them where to go. So there's just one object, and you tell him if he wants the content, we go to this part and fetch the stuff. So then the next question is which stuff to fetch, and so we introduced a manifest file that would just tell the app shell what shall we give back. This format is nothing than standardized. That's just what we came up to for our use case. So we just wanted to know which JavaScript, which CSS we have to load. And we want to give a version to be able to see if this is updated or not. That's just fine. So then the app shell has all those scripts, can load all those scripts, and then start the magic and initialize it. So this is as well something that we just introduced our way. So we go over the window and we have something, and this is like our what we stick to, that we say, okay, every micro frontend has to do that. You can also do it completely different. You could also send events and tell this micro frontend, now it's your part, please start. And then the user has this nice app shell. And what is even nicer, if he now goes to a new route, we don't have to completely reload, because he still has this app shell, and we can deal with the stuff going on. So if we run our tests against that, this looks hopefully much better, and we have 6 passing 3 challenges. So the challenge is, if you want to share the basics, this basics might have some technology. So there you might have some things going on. You could still like re-implement the basics and say, like, I have a style guide, and this exists in different kinds or different flavors. But that's something you can deal with. So I think it's just a challenge how you want to do that. If you want to be completely modular, that you are also able to just fetch some stuff somewhere, like you don't want to have always a completely inside here, then you also might have conflicts. But we decided that this will always be like one micro frontend in here. So if we fetch a new one, we completely forget about the old one, so we don't have any version conflicts anywhere. So looking at all those approaches, we're like, that approach looks really nice. I think we should meet that guy again. So let's go on a second date. And on a second date, you might talk a bit more deep about what is going on. So at that point, we already had our logged out page. And that didn't have to do anything with microservices. It's server-side rendered and just optimized to be super fast for Google to reload it. So we were fine that this has some stacks, some technology. But what we wanted to think of was this logged-in area. Because when people log in and deal with like giving answers and asking questions and also moderating that, we wanted them to be really engaged and super fast. So we have heavy users that might request like 2,000 pages one evening and answer like 500 questions. So for them, we wanted to optimize it to be really fast and not 2,000 times reload the same page. So that's where we were looking for those microservice approach. So let's see how that worked. Pointed that, should point at that. So this is our first draft after 2 or 3 weeks, I think, that we worked on it. We were 3 developers focusing on that, just to have a proof of concept, just to see does it work, and then develop it in some weeks further to see how we can do that. And we see the beginning was a bit slow because we didn't optimize in the beginning, but we already see that header and footer stay. Even when we navigate, we have this like comfort zone that we don't have to reload everything. Right. So if we now look at the difference from where we came, so I tried to perform the same actions on the left than I did on the right, and just to see the difference. You can already see that we have much softer switches, but initially it wasn't that much faster. Great. So let's try to do this in real time. So if we request the old page, we see that we get this one HTML document, and in there, a bit bigger, we get everything, like from the header, there's a lot of stuff, there was some point inline, and we ship that every time on the old page. And beside that, we have like CSS and JavaScript. That is then cached in the browser. No, that's not that bad. But still, we have this completely reload, and we have to completely process everything new. Right? Fine till then? OK, let's look at the new part. You saw, I might redo that. So here, you already have this. We're showing that there's more stuff to come, and then you see more stuff. And if you now navigate, you see this stays. We can have this nice loading animation up here, and we'll always stay in that context, even if you go to any other page. So looking here, we once got the app shell. It was like 16.4, so this was even better than we would. Here. So 104. That's already a very nice reduction here, like 20% only from what it was before. But what is even better, that when we look here, we see this manifest that he got. Let's make that bigger. Doesn't look that nice, but here you can see like it goes to the locked-in question and collects that bundle. And then it just has that in mind. So we only ship what he really needs there. Also, here we see that it got the basic bundle of the app shell and then just the bundle of where we were, the microservice we stayed in. We can go to another microservice, and then we will see he will load the other bundle just as we went there. OK. So let's go back, evaluate that one. So if you look at that and run it against that, we see that we decided to not already run independently because it wasn't just necessary for us yet. It's not that huge that we have to. Our basic stuff, so the components we share are in Preact or in Handlebars. So we have two technologies there. So we are not completely independent of that. If someone would do it completely differently, he might have to rewrite some stuff, but still the CSS would be there, the style guide would be there for him. And we decided to not be that modular that we could load just one fragment or one part. We always load the whole thing, as we prefer that to be really technology agnostic there. Great. So when we look back and look at the pros and cons we have here, so yes, our environment got more complex. We have some redundancy somewhere. That's also what you have with microservices at some point. But I think it's really limited. You can have like separate stuff that you import and things like that. The build scripts were really tricky, also because we changed from gulp to webpack. So we first had to like deal with that and then see how this different web package, like we have several, each front end has its webpack configuration. How this can deal together, especially if as we wanted to have hot reloading. So if we change something in the shared part, all the others will update in the meantime, like in the same time, and you have a refreshed page with the new stuff. So this was quite tricky to get that in the right order, also to watch the files correctly. But if it's done, that's really nice and really fast for you as a developer. What you have to deal more is with error handling. So now that you have the app shell and your user once has the app shell and something fails, it's super nice for you because you can deal with that. You can tell the user. You just don't have to display like, sorry, we are not available or something. You can say, oh, sorry, only this request didn't make it through. You can either try again or try later or whatever. So you can handle that. That's super cool for the user and your user experience. But as a developer, you have to take more care into that because not just the server will respond with something. And yeah, you still have some shared dependencies for your UI components. But you still can try to go away from that even further if you like. But what we did gain? So we have a much faster onboarding. My colleague who joined the team, he was ready in a day to understand this. And he could even start with one micro front and understand this. This is like maybe 50 tests you run. That's something you can understand. That's something you can deploy. And you are pretty sure you will not destroy the whole page if you change something there. So that's really cool. And you're independent. So if you change something in one front end, it doesn't like touch the others, and you can be sure that it doesn't like influence the whole page in some way. And you have a much easier testing because you don't have to run the whole test suite every time. You're more resilient, especially if you run independently. If one micro front end of the, I don't know, settings page is down, your e-commerce shop will still work. So that's pretty nice, especially for the parts that really touch your business. And it's future-proof. So if you see, oh, there's something coming up, I want to try that out, and you have your new thing you want to build, you can just build one new micro front end, try it out. If you see, this is really cool, that's the cool new thing you want to do, you can build the rest as well with those. But you can also say, like, yeah, we tried it out, the to-do list worked so well, but our context doesn't work with that. That's just too complicated. And then you only have that little part, and you can throw it away and rebuild it and tell, sorry, we need some more weeks to redo that. But you're not completely stuck with that and have to find thousands of workarounds here. And of course, it's more maintainable then. So, happily going with that approach. If you think, oh yeah, that might also be something. Maybe you consider breaking up with your one framework. What could you do? Of course, you can be open, but you're already here. So that's done. What else can you do? You can look around. So there are a lot of talks. I created a YouTube watch list. It's called just Micro Frontends, and I tried to collect all Micro Frontend talks. So you can just look at the others, especially how other companies are doing that, like how is Zalando doing that, how is Otto doing that, how are other big companies dealing with that. So they give insights about their special solution, how they did it, what fitted for them, or also introduce some other frameworks that you could use with it. And there's also a list of links. You can just go there and check out more articles, more knowledge. So this is what when I created the talk, all the links and stuff, I collected for myself, I made available. So you can just go there. There's also a list of nice people on Twitter you can follow that constantly go to conferences, talk about it, or post nice articles about it. So you can also search for that. So also those slides will be available online. And you can start dating. So you can start look at different approaches, how others are doing that. Some published it, some are like GitHub repositories. You can check out and see how they do this. And for a proof of concept, that is really wonderful. I really recommend looking how they do it, how do they do the routing, how do they do the life cycle. But I would not recommend that you use one of them hard-coded into your stuff, because then you will have a huge meta framework over your other frameworks. No, please don't do so. Please keep this app shell if you want to do it as simple, stupid, vanilla JS. No magic in there, no framework, no stuff. Great. So having this talk, having you all listening, I was thinking, what I wanted to reach. So before finishing a ticket, I was go back to acceptance criteria check. And I look at that. No participant was harmed during the talk. Happily met that. You saw 4 different approaches and considered if this might work for you. So we had the links, the server-side includes, the integration on the code level, and the app shell. Really cool. 4 approaches you learned, and some variation what you could do to improve or to extend. You also can combine things. You can still do web components and have your app shell. So some of them will even fit together. Great. And what is even better? Everyone understood why you can bet on micro-frontends. It relies on JavaScript. So if you can bet on JavaScript, maybe you can also bet on micro-frontends. Awesome. So if you now see, yes, I'm super enthusiastic. Monday morning, I go in the office and tell, hey, micro-frontends is a new cool thing. Still, I love your enthusiasm, and I'm super happy about it. But don't rush into some new relation. Start small, try it out, do a proof of concept, see if this works for you, how it works for you. If you want to have more app shell, if you want to more have fragments or web components that are like lazy loaded. It's still not working from here. I'm sorry. So we were very enthusiastically in the beginning, but we were very happy that we stayed in the same repository. Because in the beginning, you will have a lot of refactoring. You will figure out, oh, no, we need more dependencies here and there, or we need something to change, especially the naming, and you will be super happy if you can do this with 1 commit and not with 5. And you don't have any conflicts, even if you're already in production with that. We have some naming convention that just helps us to have that also, for example, for CSS rules, that they don't conflict. So we have a BAM style, so the component has its classes. We don't do any big selection. We name everything, and we have to stick to that, because otherwise they might conflict with each other. We have a living style guide. That's what I also would recommend to you, because if every team is doing his micro-frontends, maybe some already invented a date picker, and you would like to know, how that works, and you would like just to use it. If you don't see what others have done, somewhere down in some settings, you will build it newly, will build it again, will build it differently, and this might not be wonderful for your UI and UX and your consistency there. So, summing up, if you now want to break up with your Frontend Monolith thing, like, yep, that's something we do, please, sorry for that, start a new love story. Thank you.